The scorching sun beat down on Blanche Cole as she knelt in the dust, her trembling hands empty and her cheeks streaked with tears that carved clean paths through the layer of dust on her face. Colorado Territory, 1874, was a merciless place for a woman alone. Xavier Stone pulled his chestnut mare to a halt, the animal's hooves kicking up a small cloud of dust that drifted away on the hot breeze. He hadn't expected to find anyone out here, 15 miles from the nearest settlement, especially not a woman sobbing as though her heart would break. His hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip, scanning the area for danger before dismounting. "Madam," he called, keeping his distance. "Are you hurt?" Blanche startled, scrambling backward and wiping frantically at her face. "Stay back," she warned, her voice raw from crying. Xavier removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. "Don't mean you no harm. Name's Xavier Stone. Most folks call me Zav." He noticed the small, empty cloth sack beside her and the desperate hunger in her eyes. "When's the last time you ate, madam?" Her pride warred with her hunger, but after a moment her shoulders sagged. 2 days ago. Maybe 3. Without a word, Xavier reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped loaf of bread and a canteen. He approached slowly, like he would a spooked horse, and held them out to her. "Take it. Got plenty more back at my camp." Blanche hesitated before reaching for the offerings with trembling fingers. "Why would you help a stranger?" Xavier shrugged. "Out here, strangers are just friends you ain't met yet. Can't leave a person to starve in the wilderness. Wouldn't be right." As Blanche tore into the bread, Xavier took a step back, giving her space while she ate. He noted her torn dress, once fine but now ragged, and the wedding band still on her finger. "You got a name, madam?" "Blanche," she said between bites. "Blanche Cole. You're a long way from anywhere, Mrs. Cole. How'd you end up out here?" Blanche swallowed hard, her eyes darkening. "It's Miss Cole now. My husband died 3 months ago. Fever took him." She gestured vaguely eastward. "Our wagon train was heading to California. After Thomas died, they couldn't wait. Said I was slowing them down. Left me at the last settlement with what they claimed was my share of supplies." Xavier's jaw tightened. "And I'm guessing that share didn't last long. 2 weeks. Then I started walking, hoping to find another settlement." Her voice cracked. "I think I've been going in circles." The cowboy looked at the setting sun, then back at Blanche. "My camp's about an hour's ride from here. Got a decent fire, coffee, and stew. You're welcome to join me for the night. Tomorrow I can take you to Clearwater Springs. It's a small town, but decent folk live there." Suspicion flashed in Blanche's eyes. "And what would you want in return, Mr. Stone?" "Nothing more than the pleasure of your company at dinner," he replied, tipping his hat. "And maybe you could tell me a bit about where you're from. Gets lonely out here, talking to just my horse." Against her better judgment, Blanche found herself believing him. There was something steady in his blue eyes, something trustworthy in the calm way he stood, giving her space to decide. "I accept your offer," she finally said, rising to her feet unsteadily. Xavier helped her onto his horse, then led the mare by the reins, walking alongside. As they traveled, the vast landscape stretched around them, painted in golds and reds by the setting sun. "Been working as a ranch hand near Clearwater," Xavier explained. "Taking some cattle to the north pasture. Been on my own 3 days now." "You're not afraid being alone out here?" Blanche asked, glancing at the distant mountains where shadows were gathering. Xavier's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Got my rifle, my wits, and Beth here." He patted the horse's neck. "Most dangerous things out here are the 2-legged kind, and they tend to stay near towns where the whiskey flows." When they reached his camp, Xavier helped Blanche down and busied himself building up the fire while she sat on a bedroll he'd laid out for her. The camp was simple but orderly, a small tent, cooking equipment arranged neatly, and saddlebags hanging from a nearby tree branch. "How'd you learn to survive out here?" Blanche asked as Xavier stirred a pot of fragrant stew. "War taught me some. Worked as a scout after that. Rest I picked up along the way." He handed her a tin cup of coffee. "What about you? Where were you heading before all this?" Blanche cradled the warm cup in her hands. "San Francisco. Thomas heard there were opportunities there. He was a carpenter." "Good trade," Xavier nodded. "Your folks back east?" "Dead. Yellow fever 5 years ago." She stared into the fire. "Thomas was all I had left." Xavier served the stew in silence, giving her space with her grief. As they ate, he occasionally pointed out constellations appearing in the darkening sky, naming them in a low, rumbling voice that seemed to blend with the night sounds around them. That night, Blanche slept in Xavier's tent while he remained by the fire, hat pulled low over his eyes. Despite her exhaustion, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar wilderness noises and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Blanche emerged from the tent to find Xavier already up, frying bacon in a cast iron pan. "Sleep well?" he asked, not looking up from his task. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, accepting a cup of coffee from him. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Stone." "Xav," he corrected with a small smile. "Mr. Stone was my father, and he was a much more respectable man than I'll ever be." After breakfast, they broke camp efficiently. Xavier showed Blanche how to help, and she was a quick study, eager to be useful. When it came time to mount up, Xavier hesitated. "Camp's not far from here. Would you rather ride or walk alongside me for a spell? Might be good to stretch your legs after yesterday." Blanche chose to walk, and they set off side by side, leading Beth between them. The morning was cool, the landscape vast and beautiful in the clear light. "What will you do in Clearwater Springs?" Xavier asked after they'd been walking in comfortable silence. Blanche's face clouded. "I don't know. I have no money, no family. Perhaps there's work as a laundress or cook." Xavier nodded thoughtfully. "Town's growing. New hotel just opened, might need help there." He glanced at her sideways. "You know how to read and write?" "Yes, of course. I was a school teacher before I married Thomas." His eyebrows rose. "A teacher? Well, now that changes things. Clearwater's been looking for someone to teach the children. Townsfolk pooled money to build a schoolhouse last winter, but no teachers come along willing to stay." Hope flickered in Blanche's eyes. "Do you really think they would hire me?" "Can't see why not. Mayor's wife, Mrs. Holbrook. She's been teaching the little ones basic reading, but she's expecting her 5th child and can't keep up. You showing up might seem like providence to her." By midday, they reached Xavier's cattle camp. A dozen head of cattle grazed peacefully in a meadow near a small stream. Xavier checked them quickly, then packed up the few belongings he'd left there. "We'll reach Clearwater by sundown if we push on," he said, helping Blanche onto Beth. This time he swung up behind her, his presence solid and warm at her back. As they rode, Blanche became increasingly aware of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the strength in his arms as he held the reins on either side of her. It had been months since she'd been this close to another person, and something about Xavier's quiet confidence made her feel safe in a way she hadn't since Thomas fell ill. "Tell me about Clearwater," she said, partly to distract herself from these unexpected feelings. Xavier described the small but growing town, the general store run by the Millers, the saloon that doubled as a restaurant, the new hotel, and the dozen or so families that formed the core of the community. "It's not much compared to wherever you're from," he admitted, "but it's home to good people. They look out for each other." "It sounds wonderful," Blanche said softly. After months of uncertainty and fear, the idea of belonging somewhere again pulled at her heart. They arrived in Clearwater Springs just as the sun was setting, painting the small collection of wooden buildings in golden light. People on the boardwalk stopped to stare as Xavier rode down the main street with Blanche. "Stone's back," someone called, "and he's brought company." Xavier guided Beth to a modest two-story building with a sign declaring it the Clearwater Hotel. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Blanche down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment they stood close, and Blanche found herself looking into his eyes, noticing for the first time the flecks of gray in the blue. "Xavier Stone, about time you returned," called a booming voice, breaking the moment. A large man with an impressive mustache approached, slapping Xavier on the shoulder. "Cattle all settled in the north pasture. All present and accounted for, Mr. Holbrook," Xavier replied, stepping back from Blanche. "Sir, this is Miss Blanche Cole. She's had some misfortune on the trail." "Miss Cole, this is Edgar Holbrook, mayor of Clearwater Springs." Holbrook removed his hat, revealing a balding head. "Miss Cole, a pleasure. Any friend of Stone's is welcome here." "Miss Cole was a schoolteacher back east," Xavier added meaningfully. Holbrook's eyes widened. "A schoolteacher? Well now, that is fortunate timing. My Aliner's been at her wit's end trying to manage the children and her condition." He turned to Blanche with new interest. "Would you consider staying in Clearwater, Miss Cole? We can't offer much in the way of salary, but there's room and board at the hotel here, and the gratitude of every parent in town." Overwhelmed by this sudden turn of fortune, Blanche could only nod. "I would be honored to meet with Mrs. Holbrook and discuss the position." "Excellent. Come by our home tomorrow morning. It's the White House at the end of the street." Holbrook beamed, then turned to Xavier. "Stone, you'll join us for dinner at the saloon. Aliner's been asking when you'd return." Xavier glanced at Blanche. "If Miss Cole wouldn't mind the company." "I would welcome it," she replied softly. That evening, seated at a corner table in the surprisingly clean saloon, Blanche met several of Clearwater's residents. Xavier was clearly well respected, and his obvious regard for her smoothed her introduction to the community. By the end of the meal, she had invitations to tea from two women and a promise from the hotel owner that her first week's stay would be complimentary, as a welcome to town. Xavier walked her back to the hotel after dinner, the night air cool and sweet after the warmth of the saloon. "Thank you," Blanche said as they stopped at the hotel steps. "I don't know how I can ever repay your kindness." "No need," Xavier replied, his hat in his hands. "Just glad things are looking up for you." "Where will you go now?" she asked, suddenly reluctant to say goodnight. "Got a room at the Livery. I work for the Double R Ranch most days, but I'm between assignments until Monday." He hesitated. "If you'd like, I could show you around town tomorrow after your meeting with the Holbrooks." Blanche smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "I would like that very much." The next morning, Blanche woke early, nervous about her meeting. The hotel owner's wife, Mrs. Miller, had provided her with a clean, simple dress that fit well enough, and Blanche had spent an hour carefully washing and arranging her hair. Her meeting with the Holbrooks exceeded all expectations. Aliner Holbrook, a plump, cheerful woman clearly in the late stages of pregnancy, was overjoyed to find a trained teacher willing to take over the school. "The children are good-hearted if a bit wild," Aliner explained as she showed Blanche the small schoolhouse. "We have 12 students regularly attending, ages 6 to 15. The older boys come less frequently during planting and harvest, but their parents do value education." By noon, Blanche had been officially hired as Clearwater Springs schoolteacher, with classes to begin the following Monday. She emerged from the schoolhouse to find Xavier waiting, leaning against a hitching post, his hat tipped low against the sun. "Good news?" he asked, straightening as she approached. Blanche couldn't contain her smile. "The best. I start teaching on Monday." Xavier's face lit up with a genuine grin that transformed his usually serious features. "That calls for a celebration. Mrs. Peterson at the bakery makes the best apple pie west of the Mississippi." The day passed in a blur of introductions and explorations. Xavier showed her every corner of Clearwater Springs, from the small church to the blacksmith shop. Everywhere they went, people greeted him with warmth and welcomed Blanche with genuine interest. "They all seem to respect you greatly," Blanche observed as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. Xavier shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. "Been here 3 years. Try to help out where I can. Mr. Holbrook mentioned you were instrumental in organizing the cattle drive last year that saved the town after the drought." "Just did what needed doing," he said, changing the subject. "Tell me more about your teaching. What subjects do you favor?" Over the next week, as Blanche prepared for her first day of school, Xavier became a constant presence in her new life. He built her a proper desk for the schoolhouse, found books for her in the most unexpected places, and introduced her to everyone who might support her work with the children. For his part, Xavier found himself inventing reasons to be in town rather than out at the ranch. Something about Blanche's quiet determination and gentle strength drew him like a moth to flame. He'd known plenty of women in his 30 years, but none had affected him quite like this schoolteacher from back east, with her sad eyes and brave smile. Blanche's first day of teaching was both exhausting and exhilarating. The children were indeed wild but eager to learn, and by the end of the day, she'd established firm rules and captured their interest with stories of places they'd never seen. Xavier was waiting when she dismissed the class, sitting on the schoolhouse steps with a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "Thought you might need cheering after your first day," he said, offering the flowers awkwardly. Blanche accepted them with a smile that made his heart skip. "They're beautiful. Thank you." As summer progressed into fall, their friendship deepened. Xavier found reasons to escort Blanche on walks after school, and she found herself looking forward to Sundays, when he would join her for church and then dinner at the hotel. The townsfolk watched their growing attachment with approving eyes. Xavier Stone had been a solitary figure for too long, they thought, and the new schoolteacher deserved happiness after her tragedy. One crisp October evening, Xavier invited Blanche for a ride. He borrowed a gentle mare from the livery for her, and they rode out to a ridge overlooking the valley where Clearwater Springs nestled like a jewel among the autumn colors. "It's magnificent," Blanche breathed, taking in the panorama. Xavier wasn't looking at the view. "Yes, it is." She turned to find his eyes on her, and a blush crept up her cheeks. "Xavier, I'm not a man of many words, Blanche," he said quietly. "Never been good at expressing what's in my heart, but these past months, knowing you, being near you, it's changed me." Blanche's heart thundered in her chest. "Changed you how?" "Made me want things I never thought I'd want. A home, a family." He took a deep breath. "A wife." Tears welled in Blanche's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Xavier Stone?" "I reckon I am," he said, reaching for her hand. "I know it hasn't been long since you lost your husband. I know you might not be ready, but I wanted you to know that when you are ready, if you ever could be, I'll be waiting." Blanche looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face, open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I loved Thomas," she said softly. "He was a good man, but what I feel for you, it's different, stronger somehow." She squeezed his hand. "I don't need more time to know my heart, Xavier. Yes, I will marry you." The kiss they shared was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I don't have much to offer," Xavier warned. "Just a small piece of land outside town I've been saving for, and whatever I can build with these hands." "You've already given me what matters most," Blanche replied. "Hope, a future, love." They were married in Clearwater's little church 2 weeks later with the entire town in attendance. Eleanor Holbrook, now mother to a healthy baby boy, played the organ while her husband gave the bride away. Xavier's ranch boss served as best man, and Mrs. Miller stood as Blanche's matron of honor. After the ceremony, the townsfolk threw them a celebration at the saloon, cleared of its usual patrons for the occasion. There was dancing and laughter, and more food than Blanche had seen in one place since leaving the East. Late in the evening, Xavier led his bride away from the festivities to a small cabin at the edge of town. "It's not much," he said apologetically as he carried her across the threshold. "Just temporary, until I can build our proper home on the land." Blanche looked around at the simple space, neat and clean, with a vase of wildflowers on the table and a patchwork quilt on the bed that she recognized as a gift from the women of the town. "It's perfect," she whispered, drawing his face down for a kiss. Winter came early that year, blanketing Clearwater Springs in snow by mid-November. Blanche continued teaching, now walking to the schoolhouse from the cabin she shared with Xavier. Her students adored her, bringing her small treasures and competing for her approval. Xavier worked hard at the ranch and spent his evenings building furniture for their future home. Sometimes Blanche would sit by the fire, grading papers while watching his strong hands shape wood into beautiful, useful things. "You could sell these," she told him one night as she admired a rocking chair he'd completed. "You have a real talent, Xavier." He looked up, surprised by the suggestion. "You think folks would buy them?" "I know they would, Mrs. Holbrook was just saying yesterday how she wished she had a proper cradle for the baby." The idea took root, and soon Xavier was spending his evenings filling orders for the townsfolk. Word spread to neighboring settlements, and by spring he had more commissions than he could handle alongside his ranch work. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they sat on their small porch, watching the sunset. "If the furniture business keeps growing, I might give up ranch work. Focus on building things instead." Blanche rested her head on his shoulder. "Is that what you want?" "I like working with my hands, creating something lasting." He kissed the top of her head. "And it would mean more time at home, with you." There was something in his voice that made Blanche look up. "Is there another reason you're thinking about this now?" Xavier's smile was tender as he placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "Maybe I'm just thinking ahead, about the future." Blanche covered his hand with her own. "How did you know?" "I wasn't sure myself until yesterday." "You've been glowing for weeks," he said simply. "And you've been falling asleep over your school books every night." Tears of happiness filled Blanche's eyes. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Xavier knelt before her, pressing his lips to her stomach in a gesture of such reverence that Blanche's heart overflowed with love for this quiet, strong man who had become her world. As spring turned to summer, Xavier and Blanche moved into the home he had built on their land, a mile outside town. It was a sturdy house with large windows that let in the mountain light, and a wide porch where Blanche could sit and grade papers while watching Xavier work in his newly built workshop. Her pregnancy progressed without complications, and the school board hired an assistant teacher to help as her confinement approached. Xavier's furniture business flourished, with orders coming from as far away as Denver. On a warm September evening, just as the leaves were beginning to turn, their daughter was born, a strong, healthy girl with Xavier's blue eyes and Blanche's dark hair. "What shall we name her?" Xavier asked, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that seemed too large for such a delicate task. Blanche smiled tiredly from the bed. "Hope," she said. "It seems fitting, don't you think?" Xavier nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Hope Stone. It's perfect." As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, the small family settled into their new life. Blanche took a break from teaching to care for Hope, though she kept her hand in by tutoring older students in the evenings. Xavier's workshop bustled with activity as he trained 2 apprentices from town to help with the growing business. On Hope's 3-month birthday, Xavier took Blanche and the baby for a ride to the ridge where he had proposed. The valley below was dusted with early snow, Clearwater springs, a collection of smoke plumes and warm lights in the gathering dusk. "I never thought I'd have this," Xavier said as they stood together, Hope bundled warmly against Blanche's chest. "A family, a home, a purpose." "Nor I," Blanche admitted. "When you found me that day, crying with nothing left, I thought my life was over." She looked up at him, love shining in her eyes. Instead, it was just beginning. Xavier wrapped his arms around his wife and daughter, holding them close against the mountain chill. "I love you, Blanche Stone, more than I have words to say." "You don't need words," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "You've shown me every day in 1,000 ways." As they rode home in the gathering twilight, Hope sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, Blanche reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From desolation to joy, from empty hands to a heart overflowing with love, all because a kind cowboy had stopped to help a stranger in need. Years later, when Hope was joined by 2 brothers and the stone furniture business had grown into Clearwater's largest employer, Blanche still kept the cloth that had wrapped that first loaf of bread Xavier had given her. It sat in a special box alongside Hope's first lock of hair and the wildflowers from their wedding, pressed and preserved. "Why do you keep that old cloth?" Xavier asked her once, finding her looking at it on their 10th anniversary. Blanche smiled, closing the box gently. "To remind me that sometimes the smallest kindnesses can change everything. You gave me bread when I was starving, hope when I had none, and love when I thought it was lost to me forever." Xavier pulled her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been on that dusty trail where they first met. "And you gave me a reason to build something lasting, a family, a legacy." As they stood together, watching their children play in the yard of the home they had built, both remembered that moment of connection in the wilderness, a woman with empty hands, a man with bread to share, and the unexpected love that had grown between them, as vast and enduring as the western sky above.